All information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not consider your individual circumstances. You should consider the appropriateness of this information with regards to your individual objectives, financial situation, and needs. Welcome to Sharing More Than the Sheets, a podcast to help you and your partner make better financial and lifestyle decisions so that you can both focus on the things that you love. I'm your host, Michael Khouri, financial planner, green thumb, husband, and just dad. The other night I was brushing my teeth, and just like any other night of brushing my teeth here in Queensland, when it's night time and the light is on in the bathroom, on our window we normally see geckos. So if you live in Queensland, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, I'll give you an idea. Geckos in Queensland seem to exist everywhere, and one of the joys I remember even as a child is at night time looking at the window and seeing the geckos literally crawling on the window, doing what they can to eat the first moth that they see. Yes, smashing through a moth like it's a hamburger. As a child, it was one of the most satisfying feelings, and I'm not going to lie, as an adult, it's just as satisfying and it doesn't change. Especially when there's a couple there and you can see them both competing for the same moth. But something happened the other night, which personally I was amazed by, and I'm sure there's maybe a scientific reason for it, but let's just bring things down to our levels as humans. And I saw a scenario that I want to relate, that I feel relates to our lives. So I saw this gecko focusing on a moth, and it was slowly creeping up to this moth really carefully. I've never seen a gecko focus so much on anything in my life. It was literally walking up to this moth really slowly, ready to eat it. And right next to it landed a bigger moth. Literally, I would say it's at least 3 times the size of the moth that this gecko was focusing on. And what I noticed, is this gecko just kept crawling up closer to the smaller moth, completely ignoring or not realizing that there was a bigger moth right next to it. It took a couple of grabs at the small moth realized what was happening, flies away to another section of the window, and the gecko kept focusing towards the small one. And it just got me thinking, as adults, as everyday people, do we sometimes find ourselves focusing on the wrong thing in life? And Leroy Hood, an American biologist, said if you focus on the smallest details, you'll never get the big picture right. And at the end of the day, you can't do big things if you're distracted by the small ones. Personally, as a financial advisor, I see many people in their lives working towards goals, and I find them focusing on the wrong part of their goals or the wrong part of their lives, and things just aren't working and they can't really figure out what it is. And all I can say today is I'm not a motivational speaker, but let's just bring in some motivational music, please. You need to focus on what's important to you in life. You need to focus on the big picture and you need to ask yourself 3 questions when you're trying to achieve anything. The first thing is, why are things occurring as they are? In our lives, sometimes things will push us back. Sometimes things will come up in our faces. And instead of just playing the victim and letting it get to you, you need to really think, why is this actually happening? Is there a behavior that is causing this to occur? Is there a scenario that you're putting yourself into that's causing this event to occur? And secondly, you need to ask yourself, what's actually important? What are the most important things in life? And what are the things that really should be focused on to make sure that the big picture is the focus and not the small one? Because the problem is, when people are focusing on the small things in life, the things that are literally just there, they forget about the big things that they're really supposed to be working towards. The other thing about it as well is, how do these small pieces fit into the grand scheme of things? And the biggest thing that people realize is when they're that they don't realize is when they are, in a way, working towards a goal or working towards achieving something in particular, they get too obsessed with that. And they just forget why they're there in the first place or what the overall goal is. And an example that I'll give you is somebody that's working for their family. Now, at the end of the day, why are they working? For their family. Yet, they put themselves in a position where they work so hard they don't see the family. And when they do see the family, they're not really with the family. Now, I recorded an episode with Dr. Adam Fraser, December last year, on his book, The Third Space, and I'd highly recommend that you listen to it. But many times, and I'm a victim of this, I'm definitely not alien to this situation, but sometimes people are with their families, but they're not with their families. Their mind is somewhere else. Their mind is in their work, or something an email they need to send later on that night, or something that happened that day. And at the end of the day, they focus on these small factors, or they focus on tasks that should have been done, but they forget what the big picture is, that they're working for their family. Now that's just a small example, and it's an area that I'm personally working on all the time, as much as I can, and I need to keep reminding myself of this. And thankfully, I've got a very supportive wife that keeps reminding me of these things. But it is important, and looking at the big picture is going to change so many things in your life. It'll allow you to see opportunities for improvement. When you're looking at an overall picture, it's like having in a way, it's like having an outsider's perspective into your overall situation, where it's probably the best example I'll give you is if you're focusing on something small, you sort of have that, how do I explain it? It's a saying, it's not coming to mind at the moment, but you're being very narrow-minded, essentially, and your thinking is very narrow, compared to, again, having that wider picture and realizing, hold on a second, I'm not really doing this right. I need to focus on X, Y, and Z. The other thing as well is when you understand the big picture, it's very easy to communicate that with your team members, whether it's in your business or in your workplace, but secondly, to even communicate it with your family. Understanding the big picture, everyone knows what's going on. Everybody knows why this person's working long hours, or why this person's focusing on X, Y, and Z. And sometimes that sort of helps you, it brings you back to the first part for opportunities for improvement, to find areas that you could be doing better. And the third thing is it just literally reinforces the real reason that you're doing what you do. And I'll bring back that example of that person that's working for their family, that at the end of the day, they're working for their family. The real reason is their family. If someone doesn't have a family, they have a big picture. They have a reason that they're doing what they're doing. And we just need to have that perspective. Question the goal itself as well. Question why that person has that goal. Why you have that goal. And play devil's advocate and think, okay, is this actually what I want? Is this something that is best for me? Is this something that fulfills me personally, spiritually? From a mental perspective, is this a goal that's good for me? A lot of what I'm talking about can't sometimes be done by yourself. You need to seek the advice of a professional, be it a psychologist or even just a friend, someone that can listen and someone that can help you. The other thing as well is to consider different consequences. If you're working towards a goal, think, okay, what's my worst case? What if crap hits the fan and things just don't work out? What am I going to do? And when you know the different consequences, you can sort of plan for worst case scenario and best case scenario. And the biggest part about all this I can say is, and even from a personal perspective, is not to have too much pride. Not to think, yep, I'm killing it. Yes, I'm doing everything right. Because the issue is, the second you have too much pride, it's going to be impossible to realize your flaws, to see your flaws. And if you can't see your flaws, you can't work on your weaknesses. And if you can't work on your weaknesses, it's going to be a lot harder for you to achieve your goals in an efficient and in an effective manner. And pride allows you not just to look at your weaknesses, but it allows you to actually assess your goal itself and think, okay, hold on a second. I know I've been focusing on this moth for the last half an hour, but is there something better that I should be focusing my energy towards? Is there something bigger? Is there something better? Instead of just becoming obsessed with this one particular goal or this one particular scenario. Let's look at things from a different perspective. Maybe this gecko wasn't actually too focused on this moth to the point where it didn't realize there was a bigger moth. Maybe the gecko actually saw the bigger moth and decided to go for the small one, right? I'm sure some of you are probably thinking this, Michael, come on, you're not a moth guy. You're not a gecko. You're not a scientist. You don't understand how geckos work. You didn't study geckos. I get it. But what if the gecko did see there was a big moth there, but it was focusing on the small? Now, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to be paraphrasing Delatoro McNeil II. He's a motivational speaker from the US. I stumbled across this video when I was doing some late night YouTube binging, as we all do, a while ago, and I'll never forget this story. And I'm going to be paraphrasing, so I don't want to take credit for this, but I want you to listen, and I need some motivational music, please. There's a story of an old man that was fishing in the lake, and there was lots of men fishing in the lake, and he was catching a big fish and a little fish, and a big fish and a little fish. And there was a little boy off the shore watching this man. Every time he caught the big fish, he'd throw it back in the ocean. And every time he caught the little fish, he'd put it next to him in the ice cooler. And he was catching a big fish, a little fish, a big fish, a little fish. And after a few times, he decided to bring the boat back and walk home. And the little boy ran up to him and said, "Hold on a sec, you can't go home. I've been watching you for hours, and you're catching a big fish and a little fish. And every time you caught the big fish, you'd put it back. And every time you caught the little fish, you put it in the ice cooler. I don't get why you did that." And the old man reached into his bag and he pulled out a small frying pan. He said, "Son, every time I caught that big fish, I'd have to throw it back because I've only got a small frying pan. It's not big enough to cook the big fish." So this should get you thinking. And before you think about this and ask too many questions of yourself, many of us can't seize our potential because we pull back big opportunities. We close down the big doors. We hold on to the small things because we just think we're not good enough, or we can't cope, or we just can't deal with it, or it's just out of our comfort zone. So we just stick to the small stuff. We stick to the small opportunities. We stick to the small things that fit within our pedigree, the little stuff that fits within our bank account, the little things that fit with people that we grew up around, with the way we were brought up. And we miss out on the massive opportunities that we should be taking advantage of, and we're not seeking our full potential. Okay, enough with the motivational music. There are massive opportunities out there that you can be taking advantage of. And maybe this gecko didn't think he could handle the big moth. Maybe it didn't think he could do it. But you know what? It didn't try. Maybe it tried earlier, but it didn't try again. Massive opportunities are knocking on our door every single day. And many of the times we ignore them. Don't say you're not smart enough, because if you say you're not smart enough, you're not smart enough. If you say you're not fast enough, you're not going to be fast enough. If you're not tall enough, and if you say that to yourself, you're not going to be tall enough. Henry Ford, one of my favorite quotes by Henry Ford is, "Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right." A lot of it's in the mind, and you need to realize that if you believe you can do it, there's going to be a much higher chance of actually doing it than just assuming that you can't. Eleanor Roosevelt says that it takes just as much energy to wish as it does to plan. So if you want to work towards something in your life, if there's a goal, if you want to sit back and look at your big picture, think about your potential and think about what's actually important to you. Think about what you want to work towards. Last year, with COVID hit, I sent out a postcard to all my clients, and it said, "Tough times never last, but tough people do." And that's a quote by Robert H. Schuller. Now, while you think Michael's just throwing quotes at me, I want you to realize that these quotes mean a lot. Tough times never last, but tough people do. Okay, and at the end of the day, you might hit some tough times in your life. Things might look really hard. But if you keep persisting, if you focus on the big picture, and if you look at your full potential, you be you. You won't be that gecko that's trying to focus on the small moth. You'll be the one going for the big one. And if you fail, you'll try again. And at the end of the day, if you look at anybody that's succeeded with anything in their life, they have never succeeded by just succeeding straight away. They failed, they got up. They failed, they got up. And eventually they did what they did. So again, don't be the gecko. Be you and reach your full potential. Thanks for joining us on Sharing More Than the Sheets. Please make sure you subscribe to be updated with future episode releases. Please visit us at sharingmorethanthesheets.com.au to submit questions or requests for future podcast topics. These podcasts have been brought to you by Better Financial Planning Australia. To book a 15-minute phone chat, visit betterfinancialplanning.com.au.